The blood on her hands wouldn't wash away no matter how hard Catherine Foster scrubbed in the basin, though the water ran clear, and her skin was perfectly clean under the lamplight of the boarding house room in Utica, Montana Territory, this August night of 1878. Catherine had arrived in town 3 days ago on the stagecoach from Denver, carrying nothing but a worn carpetbag and secrets that clung to her like the dust from the trail. She was 22 years old, dark-haired and gray-eyed, with the kind of beauty that made men stare and women whisper, though lately she looked gaunt and haunted. The boarding house mistress, Mrs. Harrington, had given her a room on the second floor overlooking the main street, where the noise of the saloons carried late into the night. Catherine didn't mind the noise. It was the silence she feared, the moments when sleep crept close and brought the nightmares with it. She hadn't slept properly in 6 months, not since that terrible night in Kansas when everything had gone wrong. Her hands trembled as she dried them on a threadbare towel, and she moved to the window to look out at the lamplit street below. Utica wasn't much of a town, just a main street with a general store, a blacksmith, 2 saloons, a church, and a handful of other establishments scattered along the dusty thoroughfare. But it was far enough from Kansas that maybe, just maybe, she could start over. The next morning, Catherine ventured out to find work. She'd heard that the hotel restaurant needed a waitress, and though she had no experience, she was willing to learn. The manager, a portly man named Mr. Simmons, looked her over with shrewd eyes. "You got references?" he asked. "No, sir. I'm new to town." "Where you from?" Catherine hesitated. "Back east. My family's all gone now. I'm looking to make a fresh start." Something in her voice must have moved him because he sighed and nodded. "All right. You can start tomorrow morning. Be here at 5. The breakfast crowd comes early." Catherine felt a weight lift slightly from her chest. Work would keep her busy, keep her mind occupied during the daylight hours. It was only the nights she dreaded. That evening, as she walked back to the boarding house, she noticed a man loading supplies into a wagon outside the general store. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way. He moved with an easy grace despite his size, handling the heavy sacks of flour as if they weighed nothing. When he turned and caught her looking, Catherine quickly averted her eyes and hurried past. "Evening, miss," he called out, his voice warm and friendly. Catherine nodded but didn't stop, her cheeks flushing. She wasn't ready for friendly conversation, especially not with men who looked at her with kind eyes. Kind eyes had a way of seeing too much. Her first week at the hotel restaurant passed in a blur of early mornings and aching feet. Catherine learned quickly, memorizing orders and navigating the crowded dining room with increasing confidence. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in months, she felt almost normal during the daylight hours. But the nights were another matter entirely. The nightmares came every time she closed her eyes. She saw the farmhouse again, saw the flames climbing the walls, heard the screaming. She saw her sister's face, pale and terrified, calling her name. She saw the man with the gun, his cold smile as he struck the match. And she saw her own cowardice, the way she'd run and left Emily behind. Catherine would wake gasping, her nightgown soaked with sweat, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She'd light the lamp and sit by the window until dawn, watching the street below and fighting the urge to scream. Mrs. Harrington had knocked on her door twice, concerned about the sounds of distress coming from the room, but Catherine had assured her everything was fine. Nothing was fine. By the end of her second week in Utica, Catherine was running on sheer willpower and strong coffee. Her hands shook when she poured drinks, and twice she'd nearly dropped plates because exhaustion made her clumsy. Mr. Simmons pulled her aside after the lunch rush on Saturday. "You all right, Miss Foster? You look like you haven't slept in days." "I'm fine, sir, just adjusting to the work." He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. Catherine was grateful. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when it was the only thing keeping her tethered to something resembling a normal life. That afternoon, as she was wiping down tables near the window, she saw the sandy-haired man from the general store ride past on a handsome bay horse. He sat easy in the saddle, and she noticed he tipped his hat to Mrs. Henderson, the seamstress, as he passed. Catherine found herself wondering who he was, where he lived. Then she caught herself and turned back to her work. Wondering about strangers was dangerous. She needed to keep her head down and her heart closed. Sunday was Catherine's day off, and she spent it walking the outskirts of town, trying to tire herself out enough that maybe, just maybe, she could sleep without the nightmares. The Montana Territory stretched out in all directions, vast and beautiful under the late summer sun. Rolling grasslands gave way to distant mountains, and the sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. Catherine walked until her legs ached and her lungs burned, then walked some more. She found herself on a road that led out of town to the east, past a weathered sign that read Larson Ranch 2 miles. The name meant nothing to her, but something about the open land called to her weary soul. She kept walking, drawn forward by some instinct she didn't understand. The ranch house appeared gradually, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and neat white trim. Behind it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and an extensive system of corrals and fencing. Cattle dotted the pastures, and she could hear horses whinnying in the distance. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, the kind of place built by someone who took pride in their work. Catherine was about to turn back, suddenly aware that she was trespassing on private property, when she heard a voice call out, "Can I help you, miss?" She turned to find the sandy-haired man from town walking toward her, leading a horse. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a striking blue-green, like the ocean in a painting she'd once seen. He was older than she'd initially thought, probably close to 30, with smile lines at the corners of his eyes and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "I'm sorry," Catherine said quickly. "I didn't mean to trespass. I was just walking and I didn't realize how far I'd come." "No need to apologize. You're the new waitress at the hotel, aren't you?" "Miss Foster," Catherine nodded, surprised. "How did you know? Small town. Word gets around." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more approachable. "I'm Andrew Larson." "This is my ranch, Catherine Foster." She found herself returning his smile despite her exhaustion. "You have a beautiful property, Mr. Larson. Just Andrew, please, and thank you. It's taken years to build it up, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished." He gestured toward the house. "Can I offer you some water? It's a long walk back to town, and the sun's still pretty fierce." Catherine knew she should refuse, should maintain her distance, but her throat was parched and her feet were blistered. "That would be kind of you, thank you." Andrew tied his horse to a post and led her to the porch, where he poured her a glass of cool water from a pitcher that sat in the shade. Catherine drank gratefully, trying not to gulp it down too fast. "You settling in all right in Utica?" Andrew asked, leaning against the porch rail. His posture was relaxed, his tone casual, but Catherine sensed genuine interest in the question. "Well enough, I suppose. Everyone's been kind." "Where'd you come from, if you don't mind my asking?" Catherine felt her stomach tighten. "Back east." "My circumstances changed, so I decided to come west and start fresh." Andrew nodded, and to her relief, he didn't press for details. "I did the same thing about 8 years ago." Came out from Pennsylvania after my father passed. Used the inheritance to buy this land and build the ranch from nothing." "You did all this yourself?" Catherine looked around at the well-maintained property with new appreciation. "Well, I have 4 ranch hands who help with the cattle and the day-to-day work. But yeah, I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into every acre." He paused, then added, "It's lonely sometimes, but it's honest work and it's mine." Something in his voice resonated with Catherine. She understood loneliness, understood the need to build something solid and real in a world that felt increasingly unstable. "It must be satisfying to see what you've created." "It is." Andrew's blue-green eyes met hers, and Catherine felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. She looked away quickly, finishing her water and setting the glass down. "I should get back to town. Thank you for the water, Mr. Larson." "Andrew," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome anytime, Miss Foster. The walk out here is nice and you're not trespassing if you're invited." Catherine managed a small smile. "Catherine, and thank you." As she walked back to town, she found herself thinking about Andrew Larson's kind eyes and easy manner. It was a dangerous line of thought, she knew. She had no business entertaining notions about handsome ranchers or anyone else. Her past was too dark, her nightmares too vivid. She was damaged goods, haunted by things she couldn't change. But that night, for the first time in weeks, she fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from her long walk. The nightmare came anyway, brutal and vivid, but this time when she woke screaming, she found herself thinking of Andrew's steady presence, the way he'd looked at her like she was a real person and not something broken. The following week at the restaurant, Catherine found herself watching the door during the lunch rush, though she told herself she wasn't looking for anyone in particular. Andrew didn't come in. She felt both relieved and strangely disappointed. On Wednesday, Mrs. Henderson came in for lunch and sat at one of Catherine's tables. The seamstress was a pleasant woman in her 50s who'd always been friendly. "How are you settling in, dear?" she asked as Catherine poured her coffee. "Very well, thank you, madam. I heard you met Andrew Larson last Sunday." Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled with barely concealed curiosity. Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "I was walking and ended up near his ranch by accident. He was kind enough to offer me water. Andrew's a good man, one of the best in this territory if you ask me. He's helped half the people in this town at one time or another, lending money when the bank wouldn't, helping rebuild after fires or floods. Never asks for anything in return either." Mrs. Henderson stirred sugar into her coffee. "Been trying to marry him off for years, but he's particular. Says he's waiting for the right woman." "That's nice," Catherine said non-committally, though her heart had started beating faster. "I'll get your order in." She hurried away before Mrs. Henderson could say more, but the seamstress's words echoed in her mind for the rest of the day. Andrew was a good man. She'd sensed that in their brief meeting, but hearing it confirmed made something ache in her chest. Good men deserved good women, not haunted creatures who couldn't sleep through the night without screaming. That evening, as Catherine was finishing her shift, Mr. Simmons called her over. "Miss Foster, I need you to make a delivery tomorrow morning before your shift." The Larson Ranch ordered a standing weekly breakfast for their ranch hands to be picked up, but Andrew sent word his wagon broke an axle. "Since you're my best worker, I'm trusting you with this. Sam from the livery will drive you out and back." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse, to make up some excuse, but Mr. Simmons was already walking away, assuming her compliance. She sighed. It was just a delivery. She could handle that. The next morning, Catherine climbed into the wagon beside Sam, a grizzled old-timer who smelled of tobacco and horses. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold. Despite her anxiety about seeing Andrew again, Catherine couldn't help but appreciate the beauty of the morning. "Nice spread, the Larson place," Sam commented as they drove. "Andrew's done well for himself. Smart rancher, fair employer. Heard he helped you out last Sunday when you were walking." "Word really does travel fast in this town," Catherine muttered. Sam chuckled. "That it does, miss. That it does." When they arrived at the ranch, Andrew was in the yard talking to one of his hands. He looked up as the wagon approached, and a smile spread across his face when he saw Catherine. He walked over as Sam helped her down. "Miss Foster, this is a nice surprise." "Mr. Simmons sent me with your breakfast order," Catherine explained, trying to keep her voice steady. Why did this man make her feel so unsettled? "Your ranch hands meal." "That's right, I forgot I'd sent word about the wagon. Come on into the kitchen. The men are just finishing their morning chores." Catherine followed him into the house, carrying the basket of food. The kitchen was large and surprisingly tidy for a bachelor's home, with a big wooden table and windows that looked out over the eastern pastures. Morning light streamed through the curtains, making everything glow. "You can set it there," Andrew said, indicating the table. "Can I offer you breakfast? I've got coffee on and I make a decent biscuit. I should get back. My shift starts in an hour." Sam won't mind waiting a few extra minutes. He's probably already helping himself to the coffee pot in the bunkhouse. Andrew's smile was warm and genuine. "Please." "I'd enjoy the company." Catherine knew she should refuse, knew that accepting would be stepping over a line she'd drawn for her own protection. But something in Andrew's eyes made her want to stay, want to pretend for just a few minutes that she was a normal woman having breakfast with a kind man. "All right, thank you." Andrew pulled out a chair for her and Catherine sat, feeling strange and out of place in this comfortable kitchen. He poured them both coffee and set out a plate of biscuits with butter and jam. "These are really good," Catherine said after taking a bite. She hadn't expected a rancher to be skilled in the kitchen. "Thanks. I've been cooking for myself for years. You learn quick when the alternative is going hungry." Andrew sat across from her, cradling his coffee cup. "How's the work at the hotel going?" "Fine. It's good, honest work." "You look tired, though, if you don't mind me saying." Catherine stiffened slightly. "I haven't been sleeping well. New place, I suppose." Andrew studied her for a moment, and Catherine had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her careful deflections. "When I first came out here," he said slowly, "I had trouble sleeping too. The quiet was too loud, if that makes any sense. After years of city noise, the silence of the prairie at night felt like it was pressing in on me." "What did you do?" Catherine asked before she could stop herself. "Worked myself half to death during the day so I'd be too exhausted to think at night. Eventually I adjusted, made peace with the quiet." He paused. "But I get the feeling your trouble sleeping isn't about adjustment." Catherine looked down at her coffee, her throat tight. She wanted to tell him, wanted to share the weight she'd been carrying alone for so long. But the words wouldn't come. How could she explain? How could she make him understand without revealing everything? "I have nightmares," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every night. They're so vivid, so real. I wake up screaming sometimes. I'm afraid to sleep, but I'm so tired I can barely think straight." Andrew didn't say anything for a moment, and Catherine forced herself to look up at him. His expression was gentle, concerned, without a trace of judgment or pity. "What are the nightmares about?" he asked quietly. Catherine shook her head. "Things I'd rather not talk about, things I can't change." "Fair enough." Andrew reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. "Catherine, I don't know what happened to you before you came to Utica, and you don't have to tell me unless you want to, but I want you to know something. You're safe here. Whatever you're running from, whatever haunts you, it doesn't have to define you. Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes and she blinked them back furiously. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what I've seen. Maybe not, but I know what I see right now. A strong woman who's been through something terrible and is still standing, still trying. That takes courage, Catherine. One tear escaped despite her best efforts sliding down her cheek. Catherine wiped it away quickly. I should go. Sam will be waiting. Andrew nodded, standing when she did. Will you come back? Not for a delivery, just to visit. I'd like to get to know you better. Catherine wanted to say no, wanted to protect him from the darkness that clung to her. But another part of her, a part she'd thought was dead, yearned for connection, for the possibility of something good. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because I'm broken, Andrew. I'm haunted. I can't sleep, can barely function. You seem like a good man and you deserve someone whole, not someone like me. Andrew moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring. Catherine, everyone's broken in some way. We've all got scars and secrets. But that doesn't mean we don't deserve kindness or friendship, or maybe even something more. The something more hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Catherine felt her heart racing, felt the walls she'd built starting to crack. I'm haunted by nightmares, she confessed, the words coming out in a rush. Every single night without fail. I see terrible things, things I can't stop, and I wake up screaming. I'm a mess, Andrew. I'm not fit company for anyone. Andrew's expression was infinitely tender as he finally closed the distance between them, taking her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. Then I'll guard your sleep, he said simply. If you'll let me, I'll make sure you're safe through the night. You don't have to face your nightmares alone anymore, Catherine. Catherine stared at him, unable to speak. No one had ever offered her something like this before, this uncomplicated kindness without expectation or demand. It felt too good to be true, too pure to last. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Because I want to know you. Because from the first moment I saw you on the street, something in my chest recognized something in yours. We're both trying to build new lives out here, Catherine. Maybe we could build them together. It was too fast, too sudden, but Catherine found herself nodding, tears flowing freely now. I don't understand why you'd want to take this on. Let me worry about what I want. Andrew squeezed her hand gently. For now, just say you'll come back, say you'll give us a chance. All right, Catherine whispered. I'll come back. True to her word, Catherine returned to the ranch the following Sunday. She'd spent the week in a state of nervous anticipation, second-guessing her decision 100 times. But when Andrew greeted her with that warm smile and walked with her around his property, showing her the cattle and horses and telling her stories about the land, something in her began to settle. They sat on the porch as the afternoon sun painted the sky orange and red, drinking lemonade and talking about small things. Andrew told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, about his father's stern but loving nature, about the decision to come west after his parents died. Catherine found herself sharing more than she'd intended, talking about her childhood in Kansas, about her sister Emily, who was 5 years younger, about their parents who died when Catherine was 18 and Emily was 13. So you raised your sister, Andrew said. It wasn't a question. I tried. I did the best I could, but I was so young and I didn't know what I was doing. We managed for a few years, but then... Catherine trailed off, the familiar guilt rising in her throat. What happened? Andrew asked gently. Catherine looked out at the pastures, watching the cattle move slowly across the grass. She'd never told anyone the full story, had kept it locked inside like a poison. But something about Andrew made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust him with the truth. There was a man, she began, her voice shaking. His name was Robert Mitchell. He owned the farm next to ours, and after our parents died, he started coming around, offering help. At first, I was grateful, but then he started expecting things in return. He said Emily, and I owed him for his kindness. Andrew's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I refused him, told him we didn't need his help anymore, but Robert wasn't the kind of man who accepted rejection well. Catherine closed her eyes, but the images came anyway, as vivid as if it were happening again. One night in February 6 months ago, he came to the farmhouse drunk. He had a gun. He said if I wouldn't be with him willingly, he'd make sure neither Emily nor I had anything left. Catherine. Andrew's voice was tight with restrained emotion. He started a fire. I tried to stop him, tried to get Emily out, but he hit me, knocked me down. When I came to, the house was engulfed in flames. I could hear Emily screaming for me from upstairs. I tried to get to her, I swear I tried, but the smoke was so thick and the stairs were already burning. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I ran. I ran out of that house and left my sister to die. I could hear her calling my name, but I was too much of a coward to go back. I ran and I kept running, all the way to Colorado, then here. Robert died in the fire too, probably too drunk to realize what he'd done until it was too late. Everyone assumed it was an accident, that I died too since they never found my body. I let them think it. I just ran away and left Emily to burn. Catherine was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief and guilt. She felt Andrew's arms come around her, pulling her against his chest, and she let herself collapse into his embrace. "You didn't leave her," Andrew said firmly, his voice rough with emotion. "You were knocked unconscious. You nearly died yourself. Catherine, you can't blame yourself for surviving." "But I did survive. She didn't." And every night, I see her face in the flames, hear her screaming my name, and I wake up knowing that I should have saved her. I should have died trying. Andrew held her tighter, one hand stroking her hair. "You would have died. That's all that would have changed. Emily would still be gone and you'd be dead too. Is that what you think your sister would have wanted? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore except that I can't escape it. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that burning house, and I can't save her no matter what I do." They sat like that for a long time, Catherine crying out months of pent-up grief and guilt while Andrew held her steady. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back, embarrassed by her outburst. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dumped all that on you. Don't apologize." Andrew's eyes were bright with unshed tears of his own. "I asked, and you trusted me with the truth. That's not something to apologize for. Now you understand why I'm not fit company for anyone. I'm haunted, Andrew. I can't escape what happened. Then I'll help you." Andrew took both her hands in his. "I meant what I said, Catherine. I'll guard your sleep. I'll be here when the nightmares come. You don't have to face this alone anymore. You can't fix this. Nobody can. Maybe not, but maybe you don't need to be fixed. Maybe you just need time and someone to walk through it with you." Andrew's expression was earnest, his grip on her hands firm. "Will you let me try? Will you stay here tonight? Let me prove that you can sleep without the nightmares if you know someone's watching over you." Catherine's instinct was to refuse, to protect Andrew from the reality of her nightmares. But she was so tired, and the thought of not facing the night alone was unbearably tempting. "What will people say if I stay here unchaperoned? I don't give a damn what people say. But if it makes you feel better, Mrs. Peterson, my housekeeper, stays in the downstairs guest room 3 nights a week. This is one of her nights. You'll be properly chaperoned." Catherine found herself nodding before she'd consciously made the decision. "All right, I'll stay." Andrew's smile was like sunrise. "Good. Come on, I'll show you the upstairs guest room." The room was simple but comfortable, with a large bed, a dresser, and windows that looked out over the western pastures. The evening light made everything glow golden, peaceful in a way that seemed impossible given the darkness Catherine carried inside her. "I'll be right next door," Andrew said, gesturing to his own room across the hall. "If you need anything, just call out. And when I wake up screaming, then I'll be there. I promise, Catherine, you're not alone anymore." Catherine prepared for bed with a sense of unreality. She'd brought nothing with her, so Andrew lent her one of his shirts to sleep in. It hung to her knees and smelled like him, like hay and leather and something indefinably masculine. She climbed into the bed, her body tense with anticipation of the nightmares to come. Andrew knocked softly, then entered with a lamp. He placed it on the bedside table, adjusting the flame to a low, comforting glow. "Is this all right? Would you prefer it darker or brighter?" "This is fine." Catherine's voice was small. She felt vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with the emotional intimacy of this moment. "I'll leave my door open. Try to rest, Catherine. I've got you." He started to leave, but Catherine called out, "Andrew." He turned back. "Yes." "Why are you doing this? Really?" Andrew was quiet for a moment, then crossed back to the bed and sat on the edge of it. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. I see strength and courage, even if you don't see it in yourself. And because I've been lonely for a long time, building this ranch, trying to create something meaningful. Then you walked into my life, and suddenly everything felt like it made sense. We barely know each other. I know. It's crazy and too fast and makes no logical sense. But sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sleep, Catherine. I'll be here when you wake." Despite her exhaustion, Catherine lay awake for a long time after Andrew left, staring at the ceiling and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. She heard cattle lowing in the distance, heard the wind rustling through the trees outside the window. And underneath it all, she heard the steady sound of Andrew moving around in his room, a reminder that she wasn't alone. When sleep finally came, the nightmare followed close behind. She was in the farmhouse again, smoke thick and choking, flames climbing the walls like living things. Emily's screams echoed from upstairs, desperate and terrified. Catherine tried to run toward the stairs, but her legs wouldn't move. She was frozen, helpless, watching the fire consume everything while her sister called her name. "Catherine, Catherine, please." She tried to scream back, tried to move, but she was locked in place, forced to watch as the flames grew higher and Emily's screams turned to silence. Then, suddenly, there was another voice cutting through the nightmare, deep and steady and real. "Catherine. Catherine, wake up. You're safe." "I'm here." She came awake gasping, her heart pounding, and found Andrew sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand on her shoulder. The lamp was burning bright now, chasing away the shadows. "You're all right," Andrew said softly. "It was a dream. You're here with me at the ranch. You're safe." Catherine was shaking, sweat-soaked and disoriented. "Emily," she gasped. "I couldn't reach her. I know, but it's over now. She's at peace, Catherine. You have to let her rest. I can't. Every night she's there burning." Andrew didn't argue. Instead, he shifted so he was sitting against the headboard and gently pulled Catherine against his side. "Try to sleep again. I'll stay right here. The second the nightmare starts, I'll wake you. You can't stay here all night." "Yes, I can, and I will." His arm was solid around her shoulders, his presence grounding her to the present moment. "Close your eyes, Catherine. Let me guard your sleep like I promised." Too exhausted to argue, Catherine let herself relax against him. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and she focused on that sound, letting it anchor her. When she drifted off again, the nightmare tried to return, But Andrew must have sensed her distress because she felt his hand stroking her hair and heard him humming softly, some tune she didn't recognize, and the nightmare retreated, unable to gain purchase. She slept more peacefully than she had in months, waking only once more in the night. Again, Andrew was there, talking her down from the panic, holding her until she calmed. By the time dawn light began filtering through the windows, Catherine felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. "You stayed all night," she said, looking up at Andrew's face. He looked tired but content, his hair mussed and his jaw shadowed with stubble. "I said I would." He smiled down at her. "How do you feel?" "Better." "Tired, but better." The nightmares were still there, but knowing you were here made them less powerful somehow. "Then I'd say that's progress." Andrew carefully shifted, stretching his stiff muscles. "Come on, let's get some coffee and breakfast. Mrs. Peterson will be up soon, and she makes biscuits that put mine to shame." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Catherine would work her shifts at the restaurant, then spend her evenings and nights at the ranch. Mrs. Peterson, a cheerful woman in her 60s who'd been widowed young, seemed delighted by Catherine's presence and quickly became both chaperone and friend. She never asked questions about why Catherine was sleeping in the guest room instead of at the boarding house, just welcomed her warmly and made sure she was comfortable. Andrew kept his promise about guarding Catherine's sleep. Every night, after she'd gone to bed, he would sit in a chair he'd moved into her room, reading or doing paperwork by lamplight. When the nightmares came, he was always there to wake her gently and talk her back to calm. His presence became a lifeline, something solid and real to hold onto in the darkness. But it wasn't just the nights that drew them together. During the days, Catherine learned about ranch life. She helped feed the chickens, gathered eggs, and even tried her hand at horseback riding, though her first few attempts were more comical than successful. Andrew was a patient teacher, never laughing at her mistakes, always encouraging her to try again. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Catherine learned that Andrew had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, but had given up that dream to take over his father's business after his death. Andrew learned that Catherine had loved to draw before the fire, that she dreamed of studying art in a big city someday. The dreams felt like they belonged to someone else now, someone who died in that burning farmhouse along with Emily. "Why did you give up drawing?" Andrew asked one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching storm clouds gather in the distance. "It seemed frivolous after Emily died. How could I justify pursuing something as selfish as art when I'd failed at something as basic as keeping my sister safe?" "Catherine, creating beauty isn't selfish. It's necessary. The world needs beauty, especially people who have seen too much darkness." "I don't think I could anymore. My hands shake too much." Andrew took one of her hands in his, holding it up. Her fingers trembled slightly, a constant reminder of her poor sleep and constant anxiety. "They'll steady in time, and if they don't, you'll adapt. I've seen how strong you are, Catherine. You can do anything you set your mind to." His faith in her was both comforting and terrifying. What if she failed to live up to it? What if she disappointed him the way she'd failed Emily? As if reading her thoughts, Andrew squeezed her hand. "You can't fail me by being human, Catherine. You can't disappoint me by being exactly who you are." The first kiss happened on a Sunday in late September, when the air had turned crisp with the promise of autumn. They'd been walking along the fence line, checking for damage after a storm, and Catherine had stumbled on a rock. Andrew caught her, his arms strong around her waist, and when she looked up at him, something in his expression made her breath catch. "Catherine," he said softly, and then he was kissing her, gentle and sweet and full of restrained passion. Catherine felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen since the fire. She kissed him back, her arms going around his neck, and for those few perfect moments, the nightmares and the guilt didn't exist. There was only Andrew and the feeling of finally being alive again. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Andrew rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, I know we should probably take more time, but I can't keep it in anymore." "I love you, Catherine Foster, nightmares and all." Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were different from the tears she'd cried before. These were tears of relief, of joy, of a happiness she'd thought she'd never feel again. "I love you too," she whispered. "I don't know how it happened so quickly, but I do. I love you, Andrew Larson." They were married in early October, a simple ceremony in the church with Mrs. Peterson and a few of the ranch hands as witnesses. Catherine wore a dress Mrs. Henderson had made, pale blue with white lace, and carried wildflowers Andrew had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Andrew kissed her like she was precious, like she was whole, and Catherine felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. The wedding night was gentle and unhurried, Andrew treating Catherine like she was made of glass. She wasn't a virgin, had given herself to a boy back in Kansas when she was 19, but this felt nothing like that awkward, fumbling encounter. Andrew made love to her like it was an act of worship, his hands and mouth learning every curve and hollow of her body, his whispered words of love and praise making her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in Andrew's bed, their bed now, Catherine felt a peace she'd never thought possible. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing past the broken parts, for loving me anyway." Andrew tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You're not broken, Catherine. You're healing. There's a difference." The nightmares didn't stop just because she was married and happy. They still came most nights, vivid and terrible, but true to his word. Andrew was always there to wake her and hold her through the panic. Some nights were worse than others. Sometimes Catherine would wake up sobbing, convinced that the fire had taken Andrew too, and he would have to spend an hour talking her down, reminding her that he was real and solid and not going anywhere. "I'm sorry," she would say, over and over. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this." "Stop apologizing for surviving," Andrew would reply. "Stop apologizing for being human." As autumn deepened into winter, Catherine began to notice changes. The nightmares were still there, but they were less frequent, less intense. Sometimes she could sleep through the whole night without waking. Her hands stopped shaking so much. She started to smile more easily, to laugh at Andrew's jokes, to find joy in small things like the first snowfall or a calf being born or the way the sun gilded the frost on the grass. She also started drawing again. It began tentatively, just rough sketches in a notebook Andrew had bought her, but gradually she regained her confidence. She drew the ranch, the cattle, the horses. She drew Andrew, capturing his strong profile and kind eyes. The act of creation felt like reclaiming a part of herself she'd thought was lost forever. "These are wonderful," Andrew said, looking through her sketchbook one evening. "You're truly talented, Catherine. They're just sketches. They're more than that. They're proof that you're coming back to yourself." Catherine looked at her husband, this good man who'd taken on her nightmares and never complained, who'd loved her when she couldn't love herself and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What did I do to deserve you? You survived. You kept going even when it would have been easier to give up. That's more than enough, Catherine." Winter in Montana Territory was harsh, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping below zero. The ranch work became more difficult, and Catherine found herself helping more, feeding livestock, breaking ice in water troughs, and cooking huge meals for the ranch hands who couldn't make it back to their own quarters through the blizzards. The hard work felt good, purposeful, and she fell into bed each night exhausted in the best way. On Christmas Eve, Andrew presented her with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of proper drawing pencils and charcoal. "For your art," he said. "I want you to keep drawing, keep creating. Maybe someday we can send your work to a gallery in Denver or San Francisco." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Andrew, this is too much. It's not nearly enough." He pulled her into his arms. "You've given me so much, Catherine. You've made this house a home. You've filled my life with purpose and joy. I want to give you the world." "I don't need the world, I just need you." They made love in front of the fireplace, snow falling softly outside the windows, and Catherine felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. She'd learned that happiness was fragile, that it could be stolen in an instant. But she was also learning that it was worth fighting for, worth protecting. In early January, Catherine realized her monthly courses were late. At first, she dismissed it as stress or the cold weather affecting her body. But when a second month passed with no sign of bleeding, she had to confront the possibility that she might be carrying Andrew's child. The thought terrified her. How could she be a mother when she'd failed so completely at protecting Emily? What if she had a daughter and couldn't keep her safe? What if her nightmares haunted her child? She confided in Mrs. Peterson, who'd become like a mother to her over the past months. The older woman listened patiently, then took Catherine's hands. "Sweetheart, you didn't fail your sister. You were put in an impossible situation by a bad man and you did your best. That's all any of us can do." Mrs. Peterson's eyes were kind. "And you'll be a wonderful mother. You've got so much love to give, and Andrew will be right there beside you. You're not alone in this." When Catherine told Andrew that evening, he reacted exactly as she should have expected. His face lit up with joy, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We're having a baby. Catherine, that's wonderful. You're not worried?" Catherine asked as he set her down carefully. "About me being a mother? Why would I be worried? You're strong and loving and brave. You'll be an amazing mother. But Emily, I couldn't save Emily." Andrew's expression became serious and he cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. What happened to Emily was not your fault. You were knocked unconscious and nearly killed. You couldn't have saved her without dying yourself. And I guarantee you that your sister, wherever she is now, wouldn't want you to punish yourself forever. She'd want you to live, to be happy, to have a family of your own." "How do you know?" "Because that's what love is. Real love wants the best for the people we care about, even if we can't be there to see it." Catherine pressed her face against Andrew's chest, tears flowing. "I wish she could meet you. I wish she could see that I'm okay now. I think she knows. And I think she's glad you found your way to happiness." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Catherine's nightmares intensified in the early months. Andrew never wavered in his support, sitting up with her through countless nights, rubbing her back when morning sickness struck, adjusting his ranch work so he could be near the house more often. Mrs. Peterson moved into the ranch full-time, helping Catherine prepare for the baby's arrival. As her belly grew, Catherine found herself drawing constantly, filling journal after journal with sketches of the ranch, the landscape, Andrew's face as he slept, and increasingly imagined images of their child. The act of drawing became a form of healing, a way to process her past trauma and her hopes for the future. In late July of 1879, nearly a year after Catherine had first arrived in Utica, she went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Andrew stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when Mrs. Peterson suggested he might be more comfortable waiting downstairs. "I promised to guard her," he said firmly. "I'm not leaving." When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Catherine felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Andrew cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and when Mrs. Peterson placed the baby in Catherine's arms, she felt something shift inside her, something fundamental and permanent. "He's perfect," Andrew whispered, running a gentle finger down their son's tiny cheek. "Catherine, he's absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Catherine asked, unable to take her eyes off the baby. Andrew was quiet for a moment. "What was your father's name, James?" "Why? Then let's call him James Andrew Larson." Andrew looked at her. "Honoring your family, honoring where you came from." Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You do that? Even though you never met him, he helped make you. That's enough for me." They called him James, and he was a happy, healthy baby who rarely cried and seemed to find the world endlessly fascinating. Catherine proved to be a natural mother, her instincts guiding her through the sleepless nights and endless feedings. Andrew was a devoted father, taking James on tours of the ranch in a specially made sling, talking to him about the cattle and horses and the land as if the infant could understand. The nightmares continued, but they were less frequent now, and they'd begun to change. Instead of just the fire and Emily's screams, Catherine sometimes dreamed of Emily standing in a field of flowers, smiling and whole. In these dreams, her sister would say things like, "I'm proud of you," or "Be happy, Catherine," or simply, "I love you." Catherine chose to believe these were more than just dreams, that somehow Emily was reaching across the divide to tell her sister it was okay to let go of the guilt and embrace her life. When James was 6 months old, Andrew received a letter from a lawyer in Kansas. Robert Mitchell's estate was being settled, and as the sole survivor of the fire, Catherine was entitled to compensation. The property had been sold, and after debts were paid, there was a substantial sum of money. Catherine stared at the letter, her hands shaking. "I don't want it. It's blood money." "It's not blood money. It's your inheritance, what's left of your family's farm. You have every right to it." Andrew put his arm around her. "Think about what you could do with it. You could hire more help for the ranch, or you could use it to pursue your art seriously. Whatever you want, Catherine. This is your choice." After much thought, Catherine decided to use part of the money to establish a fund for widows and orphans in Utica, in Emily's name. The rest she put toward improving the ranch and buying art supplies. She began working on a series of paintings depicting life in Montana Territory, pouring her experiences and emotions onto canvas. Andrew built her a studio in one of the outbuildings, a bright space with large windows and plenty of room for her growing collection of supplies. By James's first birthday, Catherine's work had caught the attention of a gallery owner visiting from Denver. He was impressed by her raw talent and unique perspective, and he offered to represent her work. Within months, Catherine's paintings were selling, earning praise for their honest depiction of Western life and the emotional depth they conveyed. "You're becoming famous," Andrew teased one evening, reading a review from a Denver newspaper that praised her haunting, beautiful vision. "Hardly famous, but it's nice to have my work appreciated." Catherine was nursing James, who was drowsy and content. "I never thought I'd find my way back to this, to creating art. I never thought I'd find my way back to anything." Andrew sat beside them, putting his arm around Catherine's shoulders. "You didn't find your way back. You found a new path forward. There's a difference." Catherine leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of her husband, the gentle weight of her son in her arms, and the peace that had gradually replaced the constant anxiety. "I love you," she said simply. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never. Not then, not now, not ever. The nightmares never completely disappeared, but they became manageable, a part of Catherine's history rather than her present. She learned to accept that she would probably always carry some guilt about Emily, but she also learned that she could honor her sister's memory by living fully, by loving completely, by creating beauty in the world. Andrew kept his promise about guarding her sleep, though as time passed, it became less about waking her from nightmares and more about simply being there, a steady presence in the darkness. Sometimes Catherine would wake and find him watching her with such love in his eyes that it made her breath catch. "What?" she'd ask. "Just counting my blessings," he'd reply, pulling her close. As the years passed, the ranch prospered and grew. Andrew hired more hands, expanded his cattle operation, and became one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. Catherine's art career flourished as well. Her paintings were exhibited in galleries across the West, and she was commissioned to create works for wealthy patrons in Denver, San Francisco, and even New York. But she never forgot her roots, always using part of her earnings to support the Emily Foster Memorial Fund, which helped dozens of widows and orphans get back on their feet. When James was 3, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, only joy and excitement. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, a tiny thing with dark hair like Catherine's and Andrew's blue-green eyes. They named her Emily Rose Larson, honoring Catherine's sister and the new beginning she represented. Catherine held her daughter for the first time and felt a circle closing, a wound finally healing. "Hello, Emily," she whispered. "You're named after someone very brave and very special. I hope I can tell you all about her someday." Andrew, holding young James so he could see his new sister, smiled at his wife. "She'd be proud, you know, your sister, proud of who you've become, the life you've built. I hope so. I really hope so." Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, healthy and happy, surrounded by love and the wide Montana sky. James proved to be a natural rancher like his father, always eager to help with the livestock and learn about the land. Emily was more artistic, showing an early talent for drawing that delighted Catherine. They were good children, kind and curious, and raising them felt like a privilege rather than a burden. Catherine continued to paint, her work evolving and maturing as she processed her trauma through art. She created a series of paintings about fire and rebirth that were exhibited to critical acclaim, her way of finally confronting her past head-on. The paintings were painful to create, bringing up memories and emotions she'd worked hard to manage, but they were also cathartic, a way of transforming her suffering into something meaningful. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Andrew surprised Catherine with a trip to San Francisco, where one of her largest exhibitions was being held. Mrs. Peterson stayed with the children, and for 2 weeks they had time alone together, something that had become rare with the demands of the ranch and family. They walked along the beach, attended her exhibition opening, dined in fine restaurants, and made love in a hotel room overlooking the bay. It felt like a honeymoon, a chance to reconnect not just as parents and partners, but as the man and woman who'd fallen in love on a Montana ranch. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Marrying someone with so much baggage," Andrew turned to her, his expression incredulous. "Never, not for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine. You and the children, this life we've built together. I wouldn't change any of it, even the sleepless nights. The nightmares, especially those. They taught me what it means to truly love someone, to be there through the dark times, not just the easy ones." He took her hand. "We all have darkness in our past, Catherine. The question is whether we let it define us or whether we use it to grow stronger. You chose strength. That's one of the many reasons I love you." Catherine kissed him then, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. "I chose you. That's what gave me strength." They returned to the ranch renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. The Montana Territory was changing, with more settlers arriving, towns growing, and talk of statehood becoming more serious. But the Larson Ranch remained a constant, a place of safety and beauty that Andrew and Catherine had built together. When Catherine turned 32 in the spring of 1888, she was surprised with a third pregnancy. At her age, with 2 children already, she'd assumed her childbearing days were behind her. But life had other plans, and in December of that year, twin boys arrived, keeping the entire household busy and exhausted. "Well, this explains why I got so big," Catherine said ruefully, holding one twin while Andrew held the other. James, now 9, and Emily, 5, peered at their new brothers with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Are they supposed to be so small?" James asked. "They'll grow," Andrew assured him. "You were this small once too." They named the twins William and Thomas, and they were as different as 2 brothers could be despite being identical in appearance. William was calm and observant, content to watch the world around him. Thomas was active and vocal, always demanding attention. Raising twins proved to be exhausting but rewarding, and Catherine was grateful for Mrs. Peterson's help and Andrew's unfailing support. The nightmares were rare now, coming perhaps once every few months, usually triggered by stress or exhaustion. But even when they came, Catherine had learned to manage them. She would wake, remind herself that it was just a dream, and let Andrew hold her until her breathing steadied. The guilt about Emily would never completely disappear, but it had transformed into something gentler, a bittersweet ache rather than a crushing weight. On what would have been Emily's 25th birthday, Catherine took her children to the small cemetery outside Utica where she'd placed a memorial stone for her sister. It wasn't a grave, since Emily's body had never been recovered from the fire, but it was a place to remember and honor her. "This is your Aunt Emily," Catherine told her children, kneeling by the stone. "She died when she was very young, but she was brave and kind, and she loved to sing. I think she would have loved all of you very much." "Do you miss her, Mama?" young Emily asked, her eyes wide and serious. "Every day, sweetheart, but I'm also grateful for the time we had together. She taught me what it means to love someone completely, to want to protect them no matter what. Those lessons helped me become a good mother to you." "I wish I could have met her," James said. "Me too, son, me too." That night, Catherine had the dream again, but it was different. She was in the farmhouse, but there was no fire, no smoke. Just Emily, looking exactly as Catherine remembered her at 14, smiling that bright smile that had always lit up a room. "You did good, Catherine," Emily said. "You have a beautiful family. You built a beautiful life. I'm so proud of you." "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face even in sleep. "There was nothing to save me from, not really. What happened was Robert's choice, not yours." "You have to let it go now, Catherine. You have to forgive yourself." "I don't know how." Emily's smile was infinitely gentle. "Yes, you do. You've been doing it a little more every day for 10 years. Keep going, keep loving, keep creating. That's how you honor me, by living fully." Catherine woke with tears on her cheeks but peace in her heart. Andrew was there, as he always was, his arms around her. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Catherine said, and for the first time in 10 years she truly meant it. "I think I finally am." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources, harsh winters that claimed livestock, and the normal struggles of raising 4 children. But through it all, Andrew and Catherine faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. James grew into a fine young man, strong and responsible like his father. He took over more of the ranch operations as Andrew got older, showing a natural talent for leadership. Emily pursued her artistic talents, studying under her mother and eventually going to San Francisco to attend art school. William became interested in veterinary medicine, while Thomas showed a passion for teaching, working with the children at the local school. In 1894, Montana achieved statehood, a momentous occasion that Andrew and Catherine celebrated with their children and friends. The Larson Ranch had been part of the territory's transformation from wild frontier to established state, and they were proud of the role they'd played. 16 years ago, when I first came here, I was running from everything, Catherine said to Andrew as they stood on their porch watching fireworks celebrate statehood. I never imagined I'd find a home, a family, a life worth living. I knew, Andrew said, pulling her close. The first time I saw you on the street in Utica, something told me you were going to change my life. I just didn't realize how completely. I love you, Catherine said. Thank you for guarding my sleep, for guarding my heart, for giving me a reason to heal. Always, Andrew replied. Until my last breath and beyond. They were both in their 50s now, their hair showing gray, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. But the love between them was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered so many storms together. As Catherine looked out at the land they'd built together, at the house filled with love and laughter, at the children who carried their legacy forward, she felt a profound gratitude. She thought of the broken, haunted woman who'd arrived in Utica 16 years ago, unable to sleep, unable to hope. That woman had been transformed by love, by patience, by the steady presence of a good man who'd refused to let her face her darkness alone. The nightmares were gone now, replaced by dreams of the future, of grandchildren to come, of paintings yet to be created, of years yet to be lived with the man she loved. Emily would always be part of her, a bittersweet memory and a reminder of what had been lost. But she was also a blessing, a reminder to cherish every moment, to hold tight to the people she loved, to never take a single day for granted. Catherine had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the pain. It was about carrying the wounds forward while refusing to let them define you. It was about choosing love over fear, hope over despair, life over mere survival. And she had Andrew to thank for that, this gentle rancher who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who'd kept his promise to guard her sleep and her heart, who'd shown her that even the most haunted soul could find peace. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask about how Grandma Catherine and Grandpa Andrew had met, Catherine would smile and tell them the story. She'd talk about being lost and afraid, about nightmares that wouldn't stop, about a kind man who'd offered her water on a hot day and somehow seen past all her defenses to the person she could become. Your grandfather saved my life, she'd say. Not by slaying dragons or fighting bad men, but by simply being there night after night when the darkness came. He taught me that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, about staying, about refusing to let someone you love face their demons alone. And Andrew, sitting beside her with her hand in his, would add, "And your grandmother taught me what real courage looks like. It's not about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing to love anyway, to hope anyway, to keep going anyway." Together, they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of Catherine's past. The Larson Ranch wasn't just a property or a business. It was a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to create something good and lasting even from the darkest beginnings. When Andrew died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Catherine was devastated but not destroyed. She'd had 38 years with him, years filled with love and laughter, and the kind of deep contentment that comes from truly knowing another person. She missed him terribly, felt his absence like a physical ache, but she also knew that what they'd built together, the love they'd shared, was eternal. She continued painting until her own death at 81. Her final work, a portrait of Andrew as he'd looked that first day she met him, standing in the yard of the ranch with kindness in his eyes and a smile on his face. Underneath, she'd written in her careful script, "He guarded my sleep and taught me how to dream again." Their children and grandchildren inherited not just the ranch and Catherine's art, but the legacy of what real love looked like. They'd seen it in action every day, in the way Andrew would hold Catherine through the night when the rare nightmare came, in the way Catherine would light up when Andrew walked into a room even after decades of marriage, in the thousand small acts of kindness and devotion that made up a life shared. The Emily Foster Memorial Fund continued for generations, helping countless people in need. Catherine's paintings hung in museums and private collections across the country, touching hearts with their raw emotion and beautiful depiction of Western life. The Larson Ranch remained in the family, a thriving operation that employed dozens of people and served as a gathering place for family reunions and celebrations. And late at night, when the wind blew across the Montana plains, people sometimes said they could hear echoes of laughter coming from the old ranch house, could see the ghost of a woman painting in the studio while a man watched with love in his eyes, could feel the presence of a love so strong that not even death could diminish it. Catherine Foster had arrived in Utica broken and haunted, convinced she didn't deserve happiness or peace. Andrew Larson had seen past the damage to the woman underneath, and had loved her with a patience and devotion that transformed them both. Together, they'd proven that no past is so dark that love can't illuminate it, that no wound is so deep that time and tenderness can't heal it, and that the simple act of showing up for someone, of refusing to let them face their darkness alone, can change the course of a life. In the end, that was their story, simple and profound, a testament to the power of love to heal and transform. Andrew had promised to guard Catherine's sleep, and he'd kept that promise every single day of their life together, teaching her in the process that she was worth protecting, worth loving, worth saving. And Catherine, in turn, had given Andrew something precious, the knowledge that his life had purpose and meaning, that his capacity for patience and devotion had saved someone who desperately needed saving, that love given freely and without condition could work miracles. They'd built a life together on the foundation of that promise, a life filled with children and grandchildren, with art and ranching, with joy and sorrow and everything in between. They'd weathered droughts and harsh winters, loss and heartache, the normal struggles of any long marriage. But through it all, they'd had each other, and that had made all the difference. The nightmares that had once haunted Catherine became just memories, fading with time like old photographs left too long in the sun. Emily's ghost transformed from a source of guilt into a guardian angel, watching over the family that bore her name and carried her memory forward. The fire that had once consumed everything became just a distant tragedy, acknowledged but no longer defining. And every night, for 38 years, Andrew had kept his promise, guarding Catherine's sleep and heart, proving that some promises are sacred, that some loves are eternal, and that sometimes the greatest act of heroism is simply being there when someone needs you most.